Great. I think we'll still wait a minute though before we call the roll. See several of my colleagues in the chat. I know we have a number of people traveling, and so we'll probably have pretty light attendance today, but we'll give another minute or two.
That's fine.
Okay, I'll call this meeting of the Assembly Budget and Finance Committee to order. Madam Clerk, will you please take the roll?
Yes. Ms. Allard? Mr. Constant? Mr. Dunbar?
Here.
Ms. Kennedy?
Here.
Ms. LaFrance? Mr. Presberdia? Mr. Peterson? Ms. Quinn Davidson? Mr. Rivera?
Present.
Mr. Weddleton? And Ms. Zalatel.
Ms. Zalatel informed me via text that she is going to be a few minutes late. A number of other folks are traveling today. But with that, why don't we get started? We'll start with a report from the new Budget Advisory Commission Chair. Ms. Brawley, are you here?
Yes, I'm here. Sorry.
Please go ahead.
Okay. Thanks. So first we had our current or our former chair, Lindsay Hobson, step down and had a new election. So I am the chair, moving up from vice chair, and Nolan Clouda will be our new vice chair. So that's our first update. We met Thursday, February 3rd, our usual monthly meeting. We heard a great update from the Anchorage School District about their budget process and kind of issues they're looking at, and not just this year, but kind of flagging future budget issues that they're anticipating after some of the federal relief funding runs out. And then we also heard a great presentation about limited road service areas. So just generally what they are, how they work, how they're governed. So that was really informative and appreciated. And then one other issue that I just wanted to flag as something that's come up that I don't think the BAC is going to take any action on, but I just wanted to let folks know. We had a member of the public ask for some information about the school resource officer program, and specifically, how that factors into the base student allocation and whether that's considered, funding that comes from the municipality, and how that factors in. So we did a little bit of research. We found that it's considered an in-kind service. So
legally,
in statute, it's not. It's among other things, it's not something that's factored into that.
Right. I think you froze there for a minute. You were speaking about the SROs as part of the BSA.
Yes. Sorry. Couldn't tell that I was frozen. Anyway, so there were some questions budget related that we got answers to from the school district, but there was a kind of an ask for a larger policy conversation about the school resource officer program. So that's something that will that I'm going to check in with the OMB and my vice chair about, but the general tenor, I think, was that that's outside of the scope of the Budget Advisory Commission. But just wanted to flag that at least somebody had raised that kind of longer term question about what happens with that program, how it's funded, and I know that that's something to potentially take up in the future, but not necessarily from our body. So I think that's the update.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Ms. Brawley? Okay, seeing none, I'll also note for the record we've been joined by Ms. Allard and Ms. Zalatel. All right, moving on. And by the way, both the agenda and the FEMA update presentation are available on the website of the Budget and Finance Committee. So next we have a financial status update from Mr. Frisk and possibly from Mr. Moore as well. Mr. Frisk, are you here?
Thank you, Chair Dunbar. Yes, I'm on the line, and I am, as always, going to defer to Dan Moore, our Municipal Treasurer, to give this portion of the report.
Thank you. Mr. Moore?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. It's Dan Moore, I'm the City Treasurer, and so I'm going to just verbally share with the Assembly's committee here what the revenue status is as of last couple of days. We are past year end, so it gets a bit murky in terms of where the final revenues will result because the Controller Division does year-end type adjustments. However, we do have information from various taxes in terms of what was reported for either the month of December or for the fourth quarter, depending on whether it's a quarterly or monthly filing. And so what I've done is I went through the revenue status sheet that I've presented in the past, and I did some updating, and then I totaled all the sort of updated variances from that sheet, and it turns out that the projected negative variance as of a couple days ago is still actually the same as it was last month. It's $3.1 million negative revenue variance. So even though there were various pluses and minuses, and lots of different revenues, that's where we currently stand. Like I said, there definitely will be some additional adjustments that are beyond what Treasury is able to forecast or even be involved in, that are done by the Controller Division. So we do have to be patient. We hope by the middle of next month, we will actually have 99.9% final numbers. And so that we're just about a month away. I will share with the committee, because I do believe this is something you'd like to track over the course of the year, the new alcohol tax that began February 1st of last year. So we had 11 months of filings. Came in quite strong in the month of, for the fourth quarter, but especially in the month of December. And so the way it's looking, it looks like for 11 months in 2021, it will be $14.1 million, which is little over 119% above the mid-range target that had been projected. So that is good news. That is a restricted fund, as everybody knows, but it was above budget by $2.3 million. That's the way it's looking at this point in time. We will be obviously adjusting that number for 2022 based on this additional information. And we are required by OMB to provide any suggested revenue adjustments. I think it's by March 5th. So that's just around the corner. So we have been working on that, but it's still in a drafting type stage at this point. The only other thing I'd like to share with the committee is I had mentioned in the past the MOA trust fund and the payout rate. There is a code requirement that requires every 5 years that the payout rate be formally examined for sufficiency, whether or not it's too high, too low, etc. The commission, Investment Advisory Commission, had 2 special meetings, one in early January, one in early February, to go over that issue in great detail with our investment consultant. And they have prepared a resolution that is actually going to recommend a payout rate no higher than 4%. And that is going to be transmitted to the Assembly in, I think, possibly as early as the March 1st meeting. So that is coming to you soon. And in conjunction with that, I will be communicating the effects of that to OMB and recommending that the budget expectation for the MOA Trust for the annual dividend be reduced. So that's it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Note for the record, we've been joined by Mr. Weddleton. So I have a question. I know there were a number of positive and negative variances, and thank you for specifying the alcohol tax. That's one, of course, we're very interested in. And I think if you were then to project it out, some rough math, if we got similar performance next year with to this year with the additional month of revenue, then we're looking at more than $15 million, which is much more than we built into the 2022 budget. Now, of course, that might be offset by other things, but it's interesting because it's its own separate category. I had a question. I believe at the last update you did, there was a negative variance in real property tax collected. Am I misremembering that?
Mr. Chair, that was actually in personal property tax, and
Okay.
the real property should be right on budget. The real property is, of course, the big one. That's 90% of all property tax. But personal property, it looks like it's going to be about $3 million under what was budgeted. And then to circle back to what you were just saying about the alcohol tax, one sort of caveat is that the 1 month that we didn't capture in 2021 because the tax had not started yet is the month of January. The basis for making projections for 2021 alcohol revenue looked at statewide data and what was the experience month to month across the state. And the month of January is a particularly low month. So if we're at 14.1 or so, it could be that the 2022 revenue is going to be maybe break 15. And then the question will be whether or not there's maybe increased consumption due to increased, circulation around town, that type of thing with the COVID numbers, hopefully going down. So that would be another assumption to make. So hopefully that helps.
Can you mention lowering payout to 4%? And that would be in the 2023 budget, correct? If we were to do that, and just roughly the drop from 4.5 or 4.25 to 4%, how much money are we talking about in the budget? Are we talking about 1 million, 2 million? Roughly how much money are we speaking about?
Sure. Well, our proposal is not to wait a year to make the adjustment. And when I say our proposal, it's the Investment Commission's proposal. So what I'm going to recommend in the 2022 revised budget is that number come down. What's written in code right now is a not to exceed payout rate, but it doesn't prevent us from actually paying out less. The actual delta, the effect of that, if you go from 4.5% down to 4.0%, it's about $2.1 million.
Okay. Any other questions from members of the committee? Ms. Zolotel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I just want to catch up what Mr. Moore said. Is the intention to create a small fund balance that remains in the alcohol tax year over year?
Specific to alcohol tax, I actually don't track the uses or any type of residual from year to year. I would defer to OMB to see if they have a particular strategy there.
I'm sorry, maybe I just misunderstood your last statement before we wrapped up about reserving funds.
I don't believe I said anything about reserving funds unless Ms. Chair could help me remember. I don't quite remember that.
No, I don't think so. We were speaking about the municipal trust payout, but
okay,
it is an
I apologize.
It is an interesting question, though. I mean, there are millions of dollars in unspent alcohol tax funds, correct? And so, what is the plan for those?
Yeah, I would defer to OMB.
Okay. Meg, do you have a follow-up?
No, I'm having connectivity issues, so I think I might have just beeped out for part of it. Sorry about that.
No worries. Yeah, we had some earlier issues as well with the presenter. Miss Kennedy, you're in the queue.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to change topics a bit and go back to the idea that we were basically about 3 million short of regular revenues. I'm assuming those were all the funds that would normally just go into the general fund. So my question is, how does that then impact our negative fund balance status that we're currently in? Does that just basically increase that negative fund balance with the loss of those non-accrued or I don't know what the term is, sorry. But just the fact that we didn't get those revenues, so again, how does that actually affect our fund balance status? Thanks.
Mr. Chair, this is Dan Moore. I would also defer to OMB on that. I will provide one additional comment on revenues. Year-end revenues for the committee is a year ago. It was last March when the Controller Division did their year-end adjustment for property taxes. It's something they're required to do under accounting rules, and they have to determine what gets counted as a calendar year revenue versus what gets deferred into a future year revenue. That adjustment is done right around somewhere around the 10th of March of every year. That particular adjustment last year ended up being quite a negative revenue impact. It was like, I want to say $5 or $6 million. It is possible that that could swing the other way this year. And that's just kind of how historically it tends to work. There's a pattern of one year might be a negative revenue, the next year might be a positive revenue adjustment. So the $3.1 million revenue projection, negative revenue projection at this point in time, that does not factor in that year-end adjustment by the Controller Division. It's possible that we could be near zero variance after that one is done. So I just want to give a heads up to the committee about that.
Thank you.
Through the chair, Mr. Dunbar, this is Travis, for us, the CFO, and to Ms. Kennedy. Ms. Kennedy, we need to remember that the revenues may come to a restricted fund, which then are not part of fund balance equations for the 5 majors. So just a reminder that certain revenue sources do not impact fund balance the way we report them. Just a reminder, that's all.
Okay, thank you. No, that's good clarification. Don't want to mix the apples and the oranges, so thank you. Thank you,
Yes.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Kennedy. Thank you, Mr. Frisk. Okay, so I don't see any other questions. So if we could, can we move on to the FEMA reimbursement presentation?
Sure. This is through the chair, Travis Frisk, CFO. I'm going to ask that Desiree, I believe you're wearing if you could share the presentation, and then I'm going to defer the first page to Cheryl and OMB for the OMB director to speak to. And then the second page will be Alden Thurn.
Okay, so thank you, Mr. Chairman. Committee members, what we have here is we put together kind of a big picture, if you will, in a real macro sense of where the authority to spend as authorized by the Assembly compared to the amounts that have been spent and reimbursed. And so what you can see in the first line, we've got, well, let's do columns. So the authorized to spend is the amount authorized by the Assembly under the emergency orders, all right? Then the amount spent is obviously the amount spent within that authority to spend. Reimbursement received gives you how much we requested and actually physically received in our treasury. And then this potential taxpayer exposure is the difference of the amount, the authority to spend, the authorized to spend compared to the reimbursement received. Potentially in the big picture, what could taxpayers be expected to pick up if the full authority to spend was expended? Okay, so that's kind of the macro sense. So what you see, we have the earthquake emergency orders. 31.5 million was authorized. We've spent 21. The amount reimbursement received 8.8 million. So I don't need to really go through and read the lines, I imagine, but what we've done is sum those up. And then we also have included the FEMA commitments that have been made to reimburse us, but we may not yet have received them. So you can see under the earthquake and COVID, there's another 32 million that they've said they're going to send to us once we get our paperwork in or it's in the process. And that means that if we get those reimbursements, then the total potential taxpayer exposure, quote unquote, is $56.6 million. So that's really in the very big sense. And this information is all from SAP. And we have at the bottom of the line, the page, under the COVID AO, because there was one ordinance that you passed that wasn't an emergency order, and it authorized an additional 25.6 million. And out of that, we've received 6.9 million. So that translates into not tax dollars, but potential revenue shortage, in that we've spent 21 million and don't have reimbursement yet for that remaining balance. So we just kind of wanted to give sort of a big, broad sense of where things stack up. And then Alden will be able to speak to the particulars about the various FEMA requests. So with that, if there's any questions, I'd be glad to answer them, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Madam Ms. Frasca. Unfortunately, it looks like Ms. Zolotel has connectivity issues and has been kicked out of the meeting, which is unfortunate. We're getting dropped out of the meeting, so she'll have to watch the recording. Mr. Gates?
Yes, thank you. I was just curious to put this in a little more perspective, the potential taxpayer exposure. And I know that some of this is speaking theoretically, but if there's 56 million, can you translate that to, I guess, how much in property taxes per 100,000 of assessed value that might end up being for, you know, property taxpayers? And this be, I guess the second part question. If we end up collecting above the tax cap, is that typically, I don't know if I can see typically applied in one tax year or spread over several years?
So Mr. Gates, thank you, through the chair. Okay, we haven't figured out what the tax would be per $100,000. We could do that calculation, if we dig up the assessed valuation number. So we can easily do that and report that back to the group. In terms of, that's an interesting question about at what point in time do you decide you're no longer eligible, you're not going to receive reimbursement, and you need to assess the taxpayers. And so I get that would be a policy approach, in that if we have FEMA rejecting our requests, and so far the good news is they haven't done that. And Alden is certainly the expert there. But if they do reject us, then we can evaluate at that point in time if we think we have other expenditures that also won't be reimbursed. And then that would be a decision for the mayor and the assembly to decide how they wanted to proceed. So it could be over multiple tax years. You're correct if that's where you were headed.
Absolutely, I agree with you on that decision making. Thanks, Ms. Frasca.
Thank you, Mr. Gates. And I'll just note, I mean, we are still, as you can see from this slide, we still have commitments that have not received money from the 2018 earthquake. So it's clear that the time horizons on these are in the years. So it's probably quite a long time before some of those decisions have to be made, or we conclude that we're definitely not going to get FEMA funds. So yeah, at this point, maybe we go on to the next page with Mr. Thurn. Alden, are you there?
I am here. Desiree, if you can go to the next page, please. Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. I kind of put together a new page that I want to kind of keep updated on an ongoing monthly basis based upon the different questions that we've gotten over the last couple of months by both the Assembly and the administration. I get a lot of questions about what have we documented, what's been submitted to FEMA, what's been obligated, what have we gotten reimbursed. So I'm trying to put together a one-page document for you that kind of lays all that out. So as you can see here, we have currently 10 submitted projects to FEMA. Those are the top 10, totaling that we have documented to them in order to be able to submit them of just under $68 million. So we have documented those, and they are in process, of which 4 of those have been obligated to the tune of $43 million, and we've gotten a little over $36.5 million reimbursed by those projects. PW 32 community testing, as well as the PW 100 MOA management costs. We do currently have 4.6 million, which is basically the difference between what's been documented and what's been reimbursed for those two projects that are currently working through the state. I would expect payment from the state within the next 2 to 3 weeks for that total amount, which then will bring us up to pretty close to what our obligated amount is with FEMA. I think we'll be about $1 million short, composed of a little bit in PW1 and the balance of the $1 million in management costs. That is all the money that we're going to get from the state in the near term until we get additional projects and additional monies for those projects obligated by FEMA. So you can see there we've got which projects we have that have been submitted, but we have not been obligated. Almost all of those are in the FEMA early stage review process, where we get lots and lots and lots of questions about documentation, reporting. They send out a lot of RFIs and we have to respond to them. So that's basically the stage that we're in for those different projects. While those are going forward, I did put together a summary on the bottom there. I am working on 4 different projects, which we're dropping expenditures in at this particular point that we have not submitted, and will probably be a while that we until we do submit them. But I did want to kind of show how much we've at least documented and pulled the backup for compared to what was on the previous slide for COVID on how much we've actually spent. So we are rapidly getting closer to that number, and that is our goal, is to try to not be too far behind documenting what we've actually spent. Unfortunately, this emergency never ends, so it's kind of a losing battle for us. We never get completely caught up, but we have made significant progress recently in being able to try to document more out there and get those closer to what we've actually been spending. You will notice that most of those projects on the bottom there are 2021. Obviously, we currently have 2022 expenditures, which will have to have new projects created at some point in the future, and we would drop expenditures beginning this January into that, but that's a future effort there. These are all projects that are related to non-labor. We do have a forced labor project that we will have to create here at a later time, but the dollar amounts for that are significantly less. So we are focusing our time and efforts on the non-labor, given the significant dollar amounts involved. I think I'll stop right there and see if there's any particular questions on projects. I will, before I stop, I will show that we get a lot of questions about mass care, sheltering, Sullivan Arena kind of things. So we have 3 projects, the third project on the top, and then 2 of the projects on the bottom that specifically say sheltering now. So we were forced by the FEMA and the state to kind of break them up because of a date range issue. So you'll be easily able to see on those particular ones, and I'm referring to the 7.249 million one, as well as the first and fourth one on the bottom down there for $1,392,000 and $1,262,000. Those are specifically related to mass care. And then I did respond to a request yesterday. The top 2 projects, the 10,000,007 and the 5,000,005, do have, and you'll see it notated by CS there, mass care basically amounts buried in there, and I had to break those out. But at least going forward, I'm going to endeavor to have mass care expenditures that we document and incur specifically that were after the 9/14/2020 cutoff date for that we're having to deal with FEMA, specifically identified. So you'll be able to easily see what is mass care related on those particular expenditures going forward. So I'll stop there and see if there are any questions before I continue.
Thank you. Ms. Kennedy, you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, Mr. Thurn, you should know there are always questions. Okay, I'm trying to figure out if this is something I should already know. But in terms of the expenditures that are going on for the mass care, I think I was probably under the assumption that everything there was going to be FEMA reimbursable because we were considering it, emergency mass care. But my understanding is that it's costing us about $3 million a month. And if I look at all these numbers and add them up, I don't see anything that comes close to that potential of what we've spent in the last, 15, 16, 18 months now. I have to even go back and look at a calendar in terms of when we actually set up the actual sheltering services there at the Sullivan. So anyway, so I'm kind of grappling, struggling to figure out, where that additional funding documentation might be for that entire period. It looks to me like we're actually even starting some of this in like September 2020 maybe is when some of this first starts getting documented. So anyway, so that's my question is, so is everything really that, like you said, trying to be up to date as much as possible, that December 31st, 2021 date that is being expended at the Sullivan somewhere in this document? Or is there still a portion of this that maybe is potentially FEMA reimbursable, but we haven't gotten any verification on that yet? I mean, I understand that that's an additional category for things that have been submitted, but not actually decided by FEMA. So can you help me with some of that? Thanks.
Yes, through the chair, Crystal, that was a lot of questions there. So I can tell you in the top two projects there, which is the 10,000,007 and the 5,000,005, those include all mass care expenditures from the moment that the emergency started through 9/14/2020. So all of them are they aren't the full amounts, but the mass care related charges, which in the first project is just over 3.9 million, and the second one about 1,000,004. Those are there. So we have gotten those all submitted and so forth. Beginning 9/15/2020 for mass care, we've submitted the 7.2 million, and then, as I mentioned, the bottom two numbers, the 1,392 and the 1,262, that's what I've been able to document so far. There are definitely additional expenditures that I'm working through that are sheltering related, mass care sheltering related, which will significantly increase those numbers as we go through, raising those up. The 3 million a month seems to be slightly higher than what I'm seeing on the expenditures here, but Beans tends to be the biggest one, and they're running about 800,000 a month in the past. But there are definitely significant monthly expenditures in congregate in mass care sheltering that have been going on. We have not gotten FEMA to basically approve or authorize or obligate anything after the 9/14/2020 projects. That's why I kind of wanted to get the 7.2 million one out, because I wanted them to really see that and start commenting on it and asking us questions. We have received $1 million of that for mass care of that early time period. But they had a date in FEMA guidance that put the 9/15 and forward as a different kind of priority. So I feel very confident that we will get the congregate sheltering, the mass care sheltering dollars that are in the first two projects once we get those projects obligated. And currently we're having to prepare a lot of non-congregate sheltering reporting that's kind of holding that up. I have not seen any recent questions about mass care in those first two projects. Now that we've got a specific mass care project that is the third one down, which begins 9/15, we are starting to get the questions and requirements for documentation and rationale and all those kind of things. And that will be a big determination of where FEMA goes on the ultimate obligating of those funds. They have not said that mass care beginning 9/15/2020 is not eligible. They have not said that. What they have said is we need to prove and validate in accordance with the FEMA guidelines that those were expenditures that met the emergency. And that's where they ask us all these questions and we provide all the backup in detail. I do not know what their ultimate decision will be on that. But we certainly are striving and working towards providing them all the data that they need to make hopefully a positive decision and ultimately obligate that. But there is ultimately a lot of mass care sheltering expenditures that I am still gathering and will be showing up in those bottom two projects that I mentioned that will raise those numbers and get closer to the amount that you're maybe expecting to see.
Oh, thank you. That's actually very helpful. And sorry if you had to repeat it all twice, but just to kind of summarize, then it just looks like there's a lot of expenses out there that haven't actually been identified yet and then documented, and obviously a lot still pending in terms of submitting to FEMA or getting any kind of verification that they will be obligated to pay it from FEMA. So we just continue the process and we wait. Is that fair to say?
It is, and even if we were to get a initial negative decision from them, there is an appeal process that the municipality has that can go back through FEMA to continue that process. And as the chairman spoke, this is a multi-year process. This is not a weeks or months type thing. This is years of documentation and arguing and fighting and appeals to be able to ultimately make the determination on what items may ultimately be declared ineligible once we've gone through all of the available processes to the municipality of Anchorage.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that, Mr. Thurn. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, this is Travis Frisk. Can I do one thing real quick? I want to see if you will allow this. You can see at the bottom of this page right here where Alden has identified and documented 79 million. If you could please, Desiree, roll up to the first page again. We've been able to document the 79, but if you look, we've already spent the 83 million on the emergency order and the 21 million down here. So we've already spent almost 105 million. So there's another 25, 105. It's about a $25 million discrepancy that we haven't documented yet. And those are ongoing expenses and it takes time to pull those. And as Alden has said, he's working in 2020 still, as well as 2021 and 2022. So just so you understand, the expenditure on COVID is almost 105 million, and we've been able to document 79 million. So there's that 26 million.
Travis, is that right? I mean, the 22 million is for earthquake emergency orders. Isn't it a discrepancy?
No.
They happen to both be the same number. The bottom one is the 2188, Chairman, and then the 83.9. He's not counting the earthquake. It's the 83.9 on the top and the 21.8 on the bottom.
Yeah, your emergency order and your AO combined, the 83,941, and then at the bottom of the page, the 21,883.93. That's roughly 105. It is roughly the same. I can understand where it's confusing, but I'm not including earthquake. It's all COVID response. COVID is 105 million on its own.
Got it. Okay. So I have two questions for you then, Alden, and I think I've asked you this in the past, but I want to reiterate it. First of all, given this is, sort of the largest outstanding financial issue I think the city has, other than maybe the port, that's sort of a different issue. Do you need more staff? Because I think the assembly will be willing to try to track down these $10 million. And the second is, and this might be for Mr. Fisk, but how close are we working with the federal delegation? It seems like advocating for us with FEMA, particularly Senator Sullivan's office. I feel like Senator Sullivan's office should be working to try to track these down. Have we worked with the federal delegation at all, or have they assist us?
I'll speak to your first question, Chairman. I believe we're in pretty good shape on the documentation side. If Desiree, you could go down to the next page again, please. I've actually documented. I had to produce this page a day or two ago. I did another 3 million yesterday, so we're actually over 82 million right now. I don't believe our challenges with currently are on the documenting side. I believe there are a significant number of ones, but we're making really good headway and progress on that. The challenging area that we're having is the OEM department is currently paying invoices, and they're also trying to respond to the FEMA questions and do all the reporting. So if I had an area where I felt like that might be an area where we could use some assistance, it's on the side of responding to FEMA's questions, preparing all the backup and reports. That's not the documenting of the expenditure side. That's the responding to these, because almost all of these projects are at FEMA, and they have requested additional information or reports, and that has been and some of these are very, very I mean, the vaccine one is demographic data. Non-congregate sheltering is by hotel, by room, whether they got meals and whether they smoked or not. I mean, it's just a tremendous amount of information that FEMA is asking for. And if there were an area where some additional resources could help, I think that would be the area where we might be able to respond to FEMA's unending questions and requests for information, maybe more timely. That might be the one area where I could see that support might be beneficial.
Well, great. I can't speak for my colleagues, but I'll say personally, if the administration brings us a request for funding on this issue for staffing or for a contractor to help us, I will certainly vote for it, because I think, again, if we spend a couple $100,000 to track down and secure tens of millions, that is a no-brainer investment. So please bring us that request if you need it. And then to the broader administration, whether it's Travis or Amy or anyone, what is the federal delegation doing to help us secure these tens of millions of dollars? And have we asked them to help us? I guess, is there anyone from the administration that feels comfortable?
Chair Dunbar, this is Travis. I apologize. I didn't realize I was still on mute. I cannot answer that question. It's a great question. I will see if any of that has happened at this particular point in time. My gut tells me probably not, simply because we haven't run into a hard no on anything at this time. And I think that would be when we would start to engage them, and that we're having issues. At this time, it's a matter of, like Alden has stated, we submit, FEMA comes back, asks questions, we put them the information, they ask more questions. It's just a timing delay at this time. We haven't actually been given a firm no on too many things. We've had some smaller stuff, a couple $100,000 here and there that has been said, that's a non-reimbursable expense. And we said, yeah, you're right, never mind. But as far as large ticket items at this point, we haven't had a firm no. We've had some no's. We've adjusted our projects accordingly, so we could get paid on what we could and put those aside. So I think engaging the delegation at this point would not bear any fruit, and probably would be a waste of their time as well. So that's just, again, my opinion. We haven't been told no, so I don't know if we need to engage them.
Okay. No, I appreciate that, Mr. Frisk. I think I disagree for two reasons. One, because I think if we do get a no, obviously it's sort of a hair on fire moment. We want our federal delegation to already be engaged at that point. But two, I think rightly, you have been presenting, and the administration is presenting us, the assembly, for months about how big an issue this is, how the risk there is to the property taxpayer and that kind of thing. And so though we haven't got the hard nose, I think that there have been some worrying signs that you've brought to us. And so I guess my just personal opinion to the administration is I would recommend they do engage the federal delegation, particularly Senator Sullivan's office. I think Senator Sullivan's office should be engaged on this. But I appreciate that the reasoning hasn't happened yet, but I guess I disagree for now.
Chair Dunbar, just for the sake of discussion and clarity here, I'm not
Yeah.
saying we haven't. I'm just saying I don't know if we have. I would think at this
Right.
point we may not have. So that's my opinion, not the administration's. Just want to make sure we're clear on that.
Totally understand. Yep, I appreciate the position you're in, Mr. Frisk. So moving on then, I think if there's no other questions on this presentation, we've only got a few minutes left. I don't know, Ms. Frasca, I don't believe you have a written presentation. Do you have an oral presentation on the 2022 budget you'd like to give?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Well, you don't want to, but could you?
But I just want to follow up on Mr. Gates's question about what the assessed value, what the cost would be to taxpayers if we receive no further reimbursement. And the answer is it's $164 per $100,000 of assessed value. Or if you assume the average cost was $350,000, it'd be $572 if we had to collect taxes for all of the amount. So just as a follow-up there. In terms of what Mr. Moore was talking about in the moving parts of the revenue picture, as you appreciate, those are the kinds of factors that we will bring to you as part of the first quarter budget discussion. And so that's just one piece of the moving parts. So we look forward to those kinds of updates.
Okay. Are there any other questions for Ms. Frasca? I don't see any in the chat. I'll say, so do you think, I know that the first quarter budget revision process happens in April, but is there any preliminary matter you think you'll be bringing to us at the March meeting?
Good question. We're working with the departments now in terms of any previously unidentified critical needs on the spending side. But let us get an assessment. We'll get more information towards the end of this month, and I'll give you a heads up if there is, and what topic we might be able to talk about in March related to that.
Okay,
So
great.
stand by.
All right. Any other questions for Ms. Frasca? I think we all understood that this meeting was probably going to be a little light on that portion, just given where we are in the cycle. Okay, with that, other business, legislative priorities, and budget items for 2023. Is there any issue any assembly member would like to raise? Here. Okay, I'm not hearing anything or seeing anything in the chat. Okay, we have time for audience participation. Is there any member of the public who'd like to speak? Desiree, do we have anyone on the phone?
There are 3 individuals on the phone. If you *6 to unmute yourself, you can speak.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm not hearing anyone. So with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Someone help me out.
Motion
Felix?
to adjourn.
No, yeah, I don't think you can.
Move to adjourn.
There we go.
Move
Thank you.
to adjourn.
We're adjourned. Thank you.
You can't blame a guy for trying.